What's up, everybody? The Longevity Game podcast is back. Season 2, episode 1 starts now. Yes. How's everybody doing? It has been a few weeks now. I actually have people emailing me and they're like, what's going on with the podcast? Well, we're taking a little break, a little brief intermission. And then we're going to come back hard, which is what we're doing today. Hope you guys are doing well. Today, we are going to talk about some pretty cool stuff. So what the title of this episode is Why Longevity Isn't Just About Lifespan Anymore. And I've talked about this a lot in the past, health span, lifespan, that kind of thing. And so we're going to kind of get into the meat of that today. Most people think that they want to live longer, but what they really want is to live better. You know what I mean? Because let's just say that you can live to be like 100. Well, I mean, if only half your body's working, because you had a stroke or, you're debilitated and maybe you have maybe you had a colon resection and you have an irreversible colostomy. I mean, that's not a quality of life that I'd like to live with for the next, 30, 40, 50 years. Right. And so again, I don't think it's so much about living longer as it is living better. And so health span and lifespan are not the same thing. So we're going to talk about that. No one's asking for an extra 10 years if those years are filled with disease, and fatigue and dependency and all that stuff. Here's the real question. If you could live to 90 and still feel like you're 40, how does that sound? That is a nice proposition. I like that. I like that proposition way better. And so that is extending your health span and your lifespan. And so that's awesome. And so let's talk about that today. I am your host, Michael Ward, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Next Level TRT, and we're a longevity and performance medicine franchise that works with high-performance men and women to push back against father time to help extend their prime, right? Feel better, stronger, sharper, optimize their biology more than ever. And coincidentally, that's what we're going to be talking about today, extending your health span. We're also going to touch base a little bit, on some GLP-1 medications, not specifically the medications, but things that people need to do to mitigate some of the adverse reactions that I see quite commonly in people who use GLP-1s. And so I want to talk about that a little bit, toward the end. Okay, because we've really got to dial this in. People, more than ever are on these GLP-1s like semaglutide or tirzepatide. And both of those have different names too. So semaglutide is Ozempic for diabetes and Wegovy for weight loss, and then tirzepatide is Mounjaro for diabetes or Zepbound for weight loss. And then you have retatrutide, which hasn't been FDA approved yet, although that they're definitely pushing that because it is an incredible peptide, incredible medication. And I have seen so many, seemingly miraculous results on this. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my cable. And so we're going to talk about some things that we can do to mitigate some of the adverse reactions like the muscle loss and the slowed metabolism and stuff like that can happen if you're on these medications. So we're going to get into that too. All right. So anyway, welcome back to season 2, the Longevity Game podcast, where we don't just talk about adding years to your life. We talk about adding life to your years. All right. And so because if to be honest, if you misunderstand this concept, you're going to chase the wrong outcomes for the rest of your life. There's a lot of people that, they have an idea of how they want to look, how they want to feel, but some people, they do things that are kind of contraindicated or counterproductive in moving in that direction. And so we should certainly talk about some of that. Let's define 2 terms that sound similar, but are completely different. Okay, so lifespan, how long you live. Okay. And health span is close. It's how long you live well, right? And so modern medicine has gotten really, really good at extending lifespan, and but the problem is this: we're keeping people living alive longer. That's not the problem, but we're not we're not making them healthier, right? We're just putting them on things that kind of just mask or cover up, or it's like a band-aid. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, healthcare is, and especially in the United States, is really, really good at that. And this is why you see this pattern everywhere. People living in their 70s and their 80s, but spending the last 10 to 20 years dealing with diabetes and heart disease and cognitive decline, and loss of independence. That's another thing. Like, if my last 20 years, I have to have somebody come and clean me up and wipe my behind, because I'm not able enough to do that. Oh, that's a long life. That's a long 20 years to deal with that stuff, because it accelerates over time, risk for infection, all that stuff goes up. It's bad, right? That's not longevity. That's prolonged decline, right? And so, yeah, not a fan of that, but we can do stuff to help push back against this. On social media the other day, I saw this and I actually shared it. I saw this picture. It was a meme, I guess. It was a 65-year-old male who had a cane and he was kind of hunched over, and he looked rough. My gosh, he looked rough. He was overweight and he just didn't look healthy. It was not the picture of health. However, there was another guy in another image side by side, and this guy was also 65, but this dude was chiseled, right? He had a tank top on. He basically had his gym clothes on, and he was holding a basketball, and this guy had gray hair. He had gray hair in his, in his facial hair, and he looked like he was in his 60s, right? But he looked like a completely different guy, completely different, vibrant, healthy, standing erect, no cane, no assistive devices. Man, this guy was really, really the picture of health at his age. So, and in the caption was like, "You choose," right? And so I thought that, wow, that's pretty powerful. I got to share that, right? Because you do get to choose. You make decisions every day, or you don't. Because what's easy to do is also easy not to do. That can either work against you or work for you towards living a longer, healthier, more vibrant life, right? And so, yeah, longevity without quality is not a win, right? But you can do things about it every day. So let's talk about it. What actually drives health span? If we're serious, about health span, we have to focus on the systems that actually determine like how we age. Okay. And so let's break it down. First, muscle mass. Oh my gosh. I literally feel like I'm convincing people a lot, like on the daily, to lift weights, and so I'm going to make another attempt to sell you on weight resistance training. Okay. It's super important. Muscle is your metabolic armor. My gosh, your metabolic engine, right? Well, let's talk about all the things that muscles do, right? It regulates glucose. Your muscles are like a glucose sink. You know what I mean? Like, your muscles store so much glucose. And if you lose all that muscle, which you will after your 40s, your muscle mass declines 20 to 30% per decade, and it accelerates as you age. And if you're not actively building muscle, you're going to lose it, and so your body's going to start managing glucose a little different. It's going to start storing glucose a little different, which is not good. It protects against insulin resistance because of the way muscles work. It's actually, they've been shown to be myokines. They actually help with uh, with with other things like cognitive decline, right? Uh, Having more muscle is a very strong predictor of survival. If you lose muscle, like, everything else gets harder. All right. This is so important, guys. You guys have got to really get this. It's not about aesthetics as you age. Muscle is, it looks good, but it's not about aesthetics. It's about longevity. It's about health span. It's about not stepping off a curb and losing your balance because you don't have any lower leg strength and breaking a hip. and then, in 2 years you're dead because you broke a hip, right? I mean, it is important. And ladies, specifically after menopause, it gets real tough to build muscle. And you guys, you're not going to look less feminine with more muscle either. All right. And I get that a lot. I get a lot of women that are like, well, I just don't want to look bulky. Well, you're not going to look bulky overnight, right? It's not like you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to be She-Hulk, right? It just doesn't work like that. There comes a time where you can say, well, I'm putting on a little too much mass. Maybe I'll dial it back a little, um, and so it just doesn't happen like that. And have to say, having muscle tone and strength, that's sexy. It doesn't make you less feminine, right? And so let's next metabolic health, right? So this is where a lot of people are silently struggling, right? It goes back again, insulin resistance, visceral fat, which is highly inflammatory and does drive a lot of inflammation and drives a lot of insulin resistance, right? When your metabolism crashes, your your energy crashes. You gain weight quickly. You see a lot of body recomposition. You feel exhausted all the time. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that whenever we talk about the GLP-1s here in a little bit. But your metabolism it's definitely affected as you age, but there are things that you can do, right, to fix that, to help that. And one of the biggest things is recovery and rest. That is, my gosh, that's huge. Metabolic dysfunction is one of the fastest ways to accelerate aging. And a lot of people are just burning the candles at both ends and they don't rest, they don't recover. This is important. And I have to say, if you're not using some type of wearable like my Aura Ring here, you're not tracking this stuff. You don't know how stressed your body is. You can look at stuff like your HRV, your resilience scores. You can find out like how stressed your body is, and then you can take action to help lower the stress, to increase parasympathetic tone so your body can recover, right? It's just super important. Get an Aura Ring, guys. Mitochondrial function. This is my baby. I love talking about mitochondria. They are so incredible. This is your cellular energy system, right? Your mitochondria make ATP, your cellular energy currency. Without them, you'd be dead, just like that. And if your mitochondria aren't working, you don't have energy, you don't have recovery, and you don't have resilience. And so we got to focus on those. There's some really great peptides that help boost mitochondrial efficiency. And we've talked about those here before, but I'll mention them. Like MOTS-c. MOTS-c is just an incredible peptide. Increases your body's ability to stimulate new mitochondria called mitochondrial biogenesis. And then it also helps your body to get rid of old janky mitochondria in a process called mitophagy. And when you can clean those things out and get the ones that you got working really good, now you got something, right? You can start seeing some increased energy when you start adding, another peptide like SS31, which binds to cardiolipin, which is a structural integrity component of the mitochondria. Now you're working on the hardware, and with the MOTS-c, you're working on the software, right? And then when you start adding NMN or NR, which are the precursors of NAD+, man, those things, just doing those things helps so much. If you're not doing those things, if you're not optimizing your mitochondria in some way, or your mitochondrial function in some way, they create all these reactive oxygen species, these ROSs, or you might know them as free radicals, and it causes this chronic low-grade inflammation, and it makes it even tougher, right? Definitely affects your metabolism. Okay, so next, hormone balance. Hormonal balance is super important. Our body is hormonally driven. Everything that we got so many different hormones in our body, and if you're not balanced, then you can have problems. Just think about the sex hormones: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. Those are super important as we age because our body is much more inefficient at cranking those things out, as making those things. Also, your thyroid, cortisol. Our body moves. It has to have these hormones in the right balance, or you're going to see inefficiency, right? You're going to feel awful. Hormones don't just affect how you feel, by the way, they affect how you age. All right. And so it's important. So you make sure that you're getting those checked, and make sure you're going to somebody who's not going to just completely dismiss the importance of hormones, because there's a lot of people out there that do that. I can't tell you how many people that come to my clinic here in right outside of Fort Worth, and they're like, "Yeah, I went to my PCP," and they're like, "Well, it's fine. You're good. You know, you're not old enough to have those checked." You know, or I mean, just the craziest stuff. I mean, I'm no longer surprised. I've heard so many different stories. You know, on the on medical providers, physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners that are just completely averse to checking people's hormones. It's the craziest thing. All right. And then next, we're going to last, we're going to talk about inflammation, right? Inflammation, chronic low-grade inflammation, kind of what I was telling you about with the, mitochondria inefficiency. This is one of the root drivers of aging, but it doesn't just come from janky mitochondria, right? I mean, chronic low-grade inflammation comes from lots of different sources, but like zombie cells. I know we've talked about zombie cells in the past, and that these are senescent cells, right? And they actually have a term, SASP, SASP, secretory associated senescent associated secretory phenotype, SASP cells. They're also called zombie cells. These cells, when we all have them, they don't, as we age, we make more of them. These are non-dividing cells. And so they're not doing anything. They're just kind of just cranking out all these inflammatory cytokines that cause low-grade inflammation all over our body because it spreads, right? And so taking like senolytics, like fisetin and quercetin, have been shown to help clear out zombie cells, and there's other things that they're working on, other types of senolytics they're working on right now to help that too. But have you ever heard of the term inflammaging? And I know I've talked about that. This is the word that's coined for chronic low-grade inflammation as we age. And this is problematic. This is, again, we're another component of aging. And this is where we start seeing the physiological effects of aging, and not just seeing them, but feeling them. And so all these levers are things that we can work on and push back against if we choose to, and obviously you got to find people that can help you do that. But if all those things are important to you, or you're interested in that, just follow the podcast. We talk about that stuff, and, we can give you some really, really great tools on how to do these things. Okay. So when we talk about longevity, we're really talking about optimizing these systems. Okay. And so we got to do that. So I hope we're gonna switch gears, but I hope that all that stuff made sense. If it did or it did not, leave me a comment. I like to be in the comments. I love hearing from you guys, and really get a kick out of it. If you guys are on social media, I would take this time to follow us on Facebook, the Longevity Game Podcast. If you're on Instagram, the Longevity Game Podcast, give us a follow. Also, if you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, give us a follow. Drop me some comments if you have any questions or concerns. If you have any things that you like, suggestions that you want to hear more about this or more about this, yeah, let us know. We love to cover those things. Also, if you're only on YouTube right now, we are also on iTunes. We're on Amazon Prime podcasts. We are on Spotify, and we are on iHeartRadio. I think that's it. I can't think of any other place that we might be, but yeah. So if you would rather follow on any of those other platforms, we are there. All right. So let's go to GLP-1 medications. I prescribe a lot of these, a lot, because they're very helpful. I like appetite suppressants, right? And let me tell you why. Because and maybe not everybody feels this way, but appetite suppressants work well as tools. And what I mean by that is, like, when you have all this this food noise in the background here, it's hard to stay on a good diet, right? If you're driven by food noise or cravings. And so when you have tools like these GLP-1 medications, the semaglutide, the tirzepatide, the retatrutide, I mean, it just eliminates that, right? So whenever you can cancel all the food noise or you cancel out all your cravings, no more cravings, now you can guide your diet, right? And so, like at Next Level TRT, what we do is whenever somebody comes in and we want to evaluate them for weight loss, somebody wants to lose a significant amount of weight. Well, first we get a body composition scan and see where they're at, right? Because we want to see what their baseline is. We want to know how much muscle mass they have, skeletal muscle mass. We want to know how much total body fat they have. We also want to know how much water they're holding on to. We want to know what their percentage of body fat is. We want to know what their resting metabolic rate is, because if they lose muscle, that's going to drop. That's not good. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we're going to know how much water their body's holding on to, all these things. And then we're going to use that. And I create something called a Know Your Numbers blueprint. And using all that data, I'm able to create a document, a form that kind of highlights their numbers, all the numbers they need to know. And I also put in a lot of extra stuff, to help them optimize their weight loss program. But we know what their maintenance calories are. We know what their cutting calories are. We know how much protein they need, how much carbs, and how much fats they need, right? We know exactly what their heart rate is, so that we know that we can optimize their zone 2 heart rate so that they can preferentially burn fat whenever they're doing cardiovascular training. We talk about foods in the Know Your Numbers blueprint. Like these foods will help you with protein. This is how much you need as far as protein goes, and this is how much it would take. And we just help we help drive that, right? And then we start talking about medications, and then we pick out which one that we're going to use. I am a big believer in the GLP and the GIP medication, tirzepatide, but I also like the retatrutide because of the extra glucagon pathway that opens up. It's just phenomenal. So we talk about, we do all those things. Then we talk about the medication. Then we talk about exercise. And then we talk about weight training, which is absolutely important. It's got to be done, right? And so the way that these medications work, in case you haven't heard of them because you've been on a rock, they reduce your appetite. They slow gastric emptying. They improve insulin sensitivity, right? And for many people, they're life changing. And I've seen many lives change from them because of them. But here's the problem, right? No one's talking about what happens underneath the weight loss. And this is, again, why we have to get a body composition scan every time. You're not just losing fat, they're losing muscle. All right. And so in some cases, they're losing up to 30 and 40% of their muscle. Is that incredible? Because nobody's doing the things that they need to do. And I have to say, it's not always their fault. Sometimes people come in, they're like, yeah, I was on those medications and nobody ever told me I need to eat protein or build muscle. And I started looking really gangly and my metabolism crashed, and then I gained all my weight back when I came off of them, right? And so it's super important. So, you lose muscle mass, that's a problem, especially if your goal is longevity, okay? So if you lose muscle while losing weight, which you're always going to lose a little bit of muscle, right? You always should expect to lose a little bit of muscle. I do competitive bodybuilding. I do a show once a year, and I load up, man. I try to build as much muscle as I can during off season so that whenever I'm trying to trim down for my next show, I know I'm going to lose a little bit of muscle, right? And so the key is to hold on to as much as possible to mitigate as much of that sarcopenia or muscle loss as possible. And so if you lose muscle while you're losing weight, you're also lowering your metabolic rate or your metabolism. And this leads to easier weight regain. It also worsens insulin sensitivity long term, and it increases your frailty risk, right? So remember, muscle equals longevity. But if you're not lifting weights and you're only focused on that outcome, the number, I want to lose 50 pounds, and you're not checking, your body composition scans. You're just stepping on a scale. You're just seeing weight come down, but you're not thinking about the muscle loss that's happening at the same time. And so, rapid weight loss without muscle preservation is not optimization. All right. So we got to focus on optimizing. And as we lose weight on these GLP-1s, do everything that we can. Get the protein. Don't cut your calories too much. Lift weights. Make sure you find that sweet spot. There's a sweet spot when you get on these GLP-1 medications, and everybody's sweet spot's a little different. And so there comes a time where you get to a dose on those GLP-1 medications that are so suppressive. They suppress your appetite so much that you're barely able to eat anything at all, right? And if that's where you're at, you got to dial that back, because that's going to not go well for you. You're going to lose a lot of muscle. And also, you're going to have severe micronutrient deficiencies. And this is why you see people who, they've been on these things for a long time and they start losing their hair, because they're on such a suppressive dose that they're not able to eat and get the micronutrients that they need in their diet and from their diet to prevent that stuff from happening. And so you see this a lot with people who've had bariatric surgery, right? Their stomach at the end is like this big, right? And so after the surgery, they start losing lots of weight, but they also start having like skin issues. They have, like I said, start losing hair like in clumps, right? There's even something called Wernicke's encephalopathy. This is not good. This is like B vitamin deficiency that really really affects your brain. As indicated in the name, Wernicke's encephalopathy, and this is like a third world issue, but we're seeing that in people who are on GLP-1s. And so this is serious business, and so if somebody just says, here, I want to lose weight, and their provider's like, oh shoot, I got you some right here, he just pulls out the prescription pad and then says, go for it. That's not good, because they're not giving them the tools nor the education that they need in order to optimize their outcomes, right? And so here's the second issue. So whenever people stop GLP-1 medications, they often regain the weight, right? And I have people ask me this: so what happens when I get off the medication? This is a great question. And sometimes I have to actually bring in a different perspective. And I'm going to circle back to this in regard to the GLP-1 medications, but I usually like to ask this. Let's put the medication aside. Let's just assume that we're going to put you on just a really good workout regimen and dietary regimen. And you're just going to work out, and you're going to eat correctly, and you're going to lose that weight. So you do all those things for 6 months. You're really dialing in. You go in the gym 4 or 5 times a week. You're eating really, really good. You're taking good care of. You're sleeping enough. You're optimizing your recovery. All those things, and your weight is coming down, right? Then you hit that weight that your goal weight, and then you're like, I did it. And then you stop all those things. All right. Now what's going to happen? Is your weight going to stay right there? No. If you stop all the things that got you there, your weight's probably going to creep up a little bit, over time. And you're probably going to go back to eating like you did before, because you were focused on that weight. And so now you took that stimulus that was causing the weight loss away. And so now your weight's going to come back, right? Now it's going to come back it'll take a little longer, hopefully you develop strategies during that time that you're going to continue to take with you. But some people, they just work on getting down to that weight, and then they're like, all right, I'm good. And then they just go back to doing whatever they're doing, right? But that's not everybody, and it shouldn't be. You should start thinking about long-term longevity. This is a change of my lifestyle. I'm going to do this forever and ever because I want to feel great forever and ever. However, some people, they just want to hit that weight. Maybe they had a trip coming up and they want to look just really, really good. And that's okay. But when people stop GLP-1 medications, they often do regain the weight. And so why is that? This is why. Your appetite returns, right? So you're getting off a medication that suppresses your appetite. So your appetite is going to return. Also, if you haven't been building your muscle, your metabolism is slower. And let's talk about that, because your muscle, as I said, is your metabolic armor, right? The more muscle mass you have, the higher metabolism you have, the faster the metabolism you have, the higher metabolic rate you have. And you can see this with like huge bodybuilders, right? Huge dudes that carry so much muscle. They can eat all day long and not gain weight, right? Because they have so much muscle mass, it drives their metabolism up. Conversely, if you lose all the muscle mass that you have when you're trying to lose weight on the GLP-1 medications, you're not doing weight training, you're just not eating, and then that's it. You're going to lose a lot of weight, but up to 40% of it's going to be muscle. And whenever that happens, your metabolism will slow almost to a standstill. Like you can lose a lot. And this is another reason why we get the body composition scan at Next Level TRT, because we have a beginning metabolism, basal metabolic rate, and then we'll have it, we'll trend that and make sure that it's not dropping. But whenever you reduce your muscle mass, your metabolism slows. So when you come off the medication, your appetite returns and your metabolism is slower because you did not save your muscle or build muscle. You just focused on the weight loss, right? So now you're in a worse metabolic position than you were when you started, right? This is no good. So this is how you use these correctly, all right? If you're going to use GLP-1s correctly, you must pair them with high protein intake. Protein is a non-negotiable. You got to do it. It preserves muscle. It supports metabolism. Your body burns more calories whenever you eat higher protein. This is called the increase in your thermogenic effect of food, right? Protein increases the thermogenic effect of food. And so it also helps to suppress your appetite. And again, like I said, it preserves muscle, supports metabolism. So protein, number one, non-negotiable. Number two, resistance training. This is your insurance policy against muscle loss. You got to do this, and you don't have to brutalize yourself. We're talking 2 or 3 days a week. You can do a push-pull legs split, right? That means one day you're doing all push exercises, right? And then the next day you're doing all pull exercises. And then the third day you do legs. And then you take a break, right? Or you can do push off, pull off, legs off, and then start over, right? So 3 days a week, you can do that. And now you're building muscle. You're pushing back, right? Also a progressive transition plan. You don't just stop the medications if you've been on these for a long time. Now, if you've been on them for like 3 months, it's not going to be that big of a deal to just come off the medications, right? Because you haven't really gone up that high in 3 months, right? So, but if you're on these for like 6 months, you need to come off these slow. You need to taper these appropriately. And then during the time you're on these medications, you have to build habits that you can take with you, right? And this transitions into sustainability, right? That's super important. And then hormonal optimization, if that's needed, right? If testosterone is low, muscle loss becomes even more likely. And so you might want to get your hormones checked, especially if you're older. And a lot of people who carry around a lot of extra body fat, that's where you carry aromatase. Aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone into, or aromatizes testosterone into estrogen or estradiol. And so your testosterone levels can be low because you're overweight, because your estradiol is higher, right? So anyway, you just don't know what you don't know. It's good to get your hormones checked at least once a year, especially if you're over 35. And so GLP-1s are a tool. They're not the solution, all right? They work really, really good, but you also have to work really good, right? You have to do the things in order to mitigate that hit on your metabolism and your muscle mass and all the things, right? So I hope this is making sense. I hope you guys are getting a lot of value out of this. So let's bring this full circle. Okay. Longevity is not about living longer at any cost. It's about living longer, sharper, and more capable for as long as possible, right? And if you're not protecting your muscle, your metabolism, and your foundation, you're not playing the longevity game, folks. You're just delaying the inevitable. All right. I hope you got a lot of value from today's episode. I want you to share this with somebody if you find it useful, and somebody maybe who's on a weight loss journey. They need to hear this stuff. And if you want to learn how to do this right, the right way, clinically, strategically, sustainably, excuse me, follow along, because this season we're going deeper than ever before. Also, follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. We release new conversations regularly, and when I say regularly, I mean weekly. And if you have any questions on topics that you'd like for us to cover, let us know. This podcast exists to educate, not sell. I'll see you on the next episode of the Longevity Game Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Stay intentional, stay informed, and as always, go long. If you have any questions, business inquiries, you'd like to sponsor an episode, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, just send us an email. For questions or concerns about a topic or a particular episode, hit us up at hello@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, email us at beaguest@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. If you're interested in supporting or sponsoring the show, send us a message at sponsors@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.